Welcome to the Tony Frieda Show. Today we have the pleasure and honor of Dr. Christine Marra joining us. She's been a professional psychologist for 20 odd years and a clinician with thousands of patients over those years. So she's going to talk about her experience personally, professionally, on the ground, on the front lines of the mental health crisis. This is the theme of our show. There is a mental health crisis, and people like Christine know it because they deal with it every day, like I said, on the front lines. So I'm just going to read off some of the ugly facts by the numbers here, and it's depressing how much depression there is. So serious mental distress among young adults has roughly doubled since the early 2000s. Teen girls show the steepest deterioration. In 2021, 57% of U.S. high school students reported persistent feelings of sadness or hopelessness, up from 30% in 2011. Suicide-related outcomes have surged. Among girls, suicide attempts increased by roughly 60%. 60%, that's millions of kids, from 2011 to 2021. During the same time, of course, the magical antidepressant use among these kids has climbed dramatically. So it's interesting, the more they get medicated, the more depressed and suicidal they are. What a mystery. The prescriptions for teens during this time doubled from the early 2000s to late 2010s. And adults aged 18 to 29 now have some of the highest rates of antidepressant use in the country. Now, I know this from my students. I teach college, and a lot of them are on these drugs. But another problem is polypharmacy, because they don't just take the antidepressants, right? They take antidepressants and stimulants and sleep meds, and then they use recreational drugs on top of it, like cannabis. So that combination of polypharmacy in their brain is not helping them.
And alcohol.
Yeah, throw in a little booze, to wash it all down, and you have a prescription for depression and anxiety and mental health horror. This is a serious crisis. All the mental health professionals see a rise in their patient loads, and this is it's not merely a better detection, right? It's much more than that. They keep expanding the DSM, right? The diagnostic categories, very aggressive pharmaceutical marketing. They want to sell this stuff, and they're doing a great job. So they make us all depressed and anxious, and then they have the cure, except it's not really a cure. Matter of fact, I believe it's contributing to their long-term problems. So does someone like Roger McFillin. He has a Substack you need to follow. This guy's super smart, and he's got the bona fides to back it up. All right, I'm just an artist, but this guy knows his stuff.
He's a psychologist too.
He's a psychologist, and he's a critical thinker, brilliant man, and I highly suggest following him. And he points out that these psychiatric drugs were approved based on very short studies, and these patients are on them for years, sometimes decades, and they start young while their brain is not even developed yet, so fully developed. So for me, it's a prescription for mass madness, depression, anxiety, suicide, and it all goes back to the people who run the show want us sick and dead and scared, and they're doing a really good job, and they profit trillions of dollars off of our misery. So these are demons, and Christine's a scientist. I'm an artist. That's why we kind of complement one another. So I want to just ask you, what is your overall analysis, or state of the art, state of the profession you're in, the mental health services industry that you're on the front lines of, as compared to when, say, you graduated from college?
The state of mental health is really gotten a lot worse than it used to be. This isn't based on statistics. This is just based on my experience. There are so many people looking for therapy, and there are not enough qualified practitioners available. We just don't have room in our schedules. So because of that, some markets have opened up with educational degrees that are less than PhDs and less than social work degrees. And these people are coming out with licensed mental health counseling degrees and licensed marriage and family therapy degrees. LMHC, I believe, and LMFT. They have 2 years, I believe, post undergraduate training. And I'm not even against any of these people being practitioners, except that I get a lot of anecdotal stories from patients who wind up coming to see me after they've been to those professions, either who are in private practice or who are online through these online therapy companies like BetterHelp. And I hear a lot of really bad stories about them. So I think in order to maybe fill some of the saturation of need, I think they've filled it in with these less than qualified professionals who are not prepared to really do the kind of work that needs to be done with patients, especially those that are very seriously psychiatrically struggling.
Yeah, and I remember you telling me that when you started out, you'd have to advertise to get patients, and now
Yeah.
they come to you. There's no shortage of potential patients.
There's no shortage of referrals, and
Referrals, yeah.
for some reason, you could speak to anybody in my field, and they'll all say the same thing. Ever since COVID,
Yeah.
myself and a colleague, as soon as COVID started to erupt, myself and a colleague commented that, oh boy, we're going to see a significant increase in people with anxiety disorders and a magnification of issues with people with obsessive compulsive disorder. And the referrals have not stopped really since COVID at all. And it's quite sad, and it's not really the way I really see myself as running this business, based on all these people desperate to find a therapist. And I'll get calls sometimes from somebody saying, can you please call me back? I've called 20 people, 30 people, and nobody's gotten back to me. It's because we're so overloaded. We're so overloaded.
Yeah, and the COVID thing, I mean, what they did to those kids, I mean, I had a son in high school at the time, and it was just tragic. Like, he would go to school when they finally opened it up, and he said you have to stand 6 feet away from every kid, and you're not allowed to talk because you have your mask on. And it was just like, this is a time that's supposed to be building social muscles and skills, and they didn't do any of it. They were either online, and they were all depressed and anxious about that.
Yeah.
Teachers didn't know how to do it. It was a total nightmare. I saw it on both ends, as a teacher and as a parent of a student, and every end of it was just horrific. And the damage we did to those kids is going to be lifetime with people like you, because it really messed them up. And it's not
they didn't get to flex their social skills muscles at all. And obviously with social media and all the technology stuff that, became like erupted in 2012, 2013, I think, with the iPhones, smartphones, their social skills abilities, ability to communicate and talk to people face to face, has really, really been poor in just my observations.
Yeah, and you're right. But social media amplifies these, problems that have always been there with teenagers feeling like being judged and peer pressure and comparison.
Insecure.
Insecurities about looks and about status and about everything else. And
everything.
But then the added, insult to injury is they have these people on there exploiting their weaknesses, telling them that they probably have Tourette's, or they have what is that thing called? neurodivergence. They have all
Northern.
these. There's self. You see this, right? The self-diagnosing.
Yeah, yeah. I think, like sadly, what's happened is I don't know if it's because of social media, but a lot of young adults, in order to feel special or different, they're struggling with whatever they might be struggling with. But now, with all the access to so much information on the internet, they're self-diagnosing themselves because they have certain symptoms or certain things. And oftentimes, people in the brackets of teens to 20s, early 30s, whatever those 2 decades are approximately, they're coming into me saying they have a myriad of diagnoses. And it's really sad because most of them have nothing.
Yeah,
But they are trying to figure out why they're struggling with something. So they're researching and looking at this stuff and thinking they have this thing, that these things they're saying that they have are not common. They're kind of rare, although there's an explosion of stuff like ADHD, depression, and anxiety. But it seems like it's more societally driven than it
yeah.
is
It's
like
cultural.
more biologically driven.
Yeah, it's
Um,
societal because well, a lot of this stuff is sort of pathologizing normal teenage emotions. Teenagers are a mess, and they're still trying to identify themselves and individuate and find out who they are. And
yeah,
I mean, sexually and like just they're a mess. This is nothing new. Teenagers are a mess, and a lot of it's being pathologized,
they're
but also
confused. They're
they're
confused.
confused. And now somebody tells them, "Oh, this is why you're confused and why
Yeah.
you go through this because you have this diagnosis." And there's a famous case in Germany where there was this YouTube influencer who had Tourette's, and then they started noticing that like half the kids in these classrooms in Germany, who this guy was very popular, they all started saying they had Tourette's. And it's like, Tourette's, as you know, is a very rare disorder, right?
Very rare. I don't even know what the
As-
percentage is. It's extreme. I've never actually worked with anybody with Tourette's in all my years.
Yeah, you've seen thousands of patients. So
Yeah.
it's a very rare thing. And then obviously it's anomalous when half the class says they have, and it's not organic, it's not real, but it's that it's like an infection, like a societal infection. And it's happening. And it also, there's another part of it that everything's kind of the opposite when I was a kid. Like if you had a disorder when I was a kid, like you didn't want to own it. Like you were trying to hide it from people
Right.
because then you were ostracized.
It
Today,
didn't make you special. It made you special in a more negative sort of way.
exactly. We
Yeah.
had, the
Yeah.
Special Olympics or the special, these kids were special, but it was, a euphemism for,
And it
they got some problems.
and it might be a person or two in your school. It wouldn't be 70%,
Yeah. I mean,
which
one
is
kid in the class
now,
had,
I think, the statistic, right, is that it's about 70% of teens have a diagnosis of something,
well, yeah,
which
because it
is
makes
like
them,
disturbing.
it makes them special. It gives them an identity. They get to join a group so they don't feel alone. And the
It gives
test,
them meaning, it gives them purpose, it gives them identity.
it gives them social status too. This is the weird part, because
Yeah.
now, okay, you're special. Like you have Tourette's. Like you're not just like everybody else. So there's a weird social currency that they've developed. That's an inversion of, that I think the natural order. What it's tragic. Some people have these things, but it's not. It's not something that's to be celebrated. It's like let's try to help them.
Yeah.
Rather than just like I'm proud of my autism kind of thing. It's like it was celebrating this race to the bottom. This deterioration of the human standards. And it's really tragic. And the kids are caught up in it. I mean, they're on these things, you know, how many hours a day?
Which
Hundreds.
cause brain shrinkage, by the way,
Yeah, no,
particularly
I mean,
when
not to mention,
your brain is still developing till the age of 25. It's causing shrinkage to people's kids' brains. It's tapping into their addiction, compulsive component to their brain as well.
yeah, well, it was designed, they used the systems that they got to use in the casinos to get people addicted to slot machines. The intermittent dopamine reward system. This
Intermittent
is all
reinforcement
science
schedule.
designed
Yes.
to enslave us, to ruin us, and it's become an inseparable part of us, unfortunately. But I remember we could live without these things. I did it for like 40 years. So it's
It's very tragic. We know what it's like to exist without these things, but this is truly one of the things that's, I believe, is really affecting young adults' mental health in this country, very sadly.
very
Very.
sadly. So, and then they have the answer, which is these drugs, which are, temporarily they can be efficacious, but it's, these kids, they have unhealthy standard American diet. They're very sedentary because they're on
They're
devices.
very sedentary.
They're getting screen light all day instead of sunlight. They're being exposed to EMFs. They're just a mess. And I see it in my students, these kids, like they do these projects where they talk about this. They do illustrations of them chained to their phone. Like they know, they're aware of it, but they can't break
Yeah.
the chain, and it's because
Yeah.
then you're totally separated from society because everything happens online. So it's this trap that we're stuck in. We're all stuck in it, but
It's
especially the
very
poor.
sad. It's they'll a lot of them will say to me, "Oh, I socialize. I talk to so and so all the time," and I'm like, I've really learned in the last few years to ask them, "Do you mean you spoke to them on the phone or you saw them in person?" And they'll say, "No, I texted." And we all know that texting is very different than verbal communication. Written language and typing, a note to somebody is not the same as speaking. The context gets lost, right? How many times have we all had misunderstandings with the text, right?
Yeah.
Because you're not getting the tone of voice, you're not getting the eye contact, you're not getting the body language. So that they're really not learning how to interact, most of them, and how to speak to people in ways that are effective to get something they might want to get across. Um,
Yeah.
it's
No, it's tragic because they're not building those muscles, and also then there's the other added problem of online, these dating websites where it's like, this is not the way courtship was designed, and it's so, and then it just constant rejection, and a lot of kids get it makes them feel horrible about
yes,
themselves. I know
a lot of young men get
young
rejected.
men, on
Right.
the young men's dating sites, 10% of the men get 90% of the female attention.
Yeah.
So the other 90% of the men feel like unworthy, and they feel they have no self-esteem, and it just builds and builds and builds until they become these incels, right? Involuntary celibates. And then they become bitter and disenfranchised, and they congregate in these online groups where they just tell each other how much suffering they're going through. That creates another problem. So it's this cascading system of mental health disorders that just now it's snowballing. I mean, if these numbers that I read you continue, like, we're in a lot of trouble. I mean, people talk about it, and I've seen it personally, like 10-year-old girls talking about suicide. Like, that was unheard of.
Very
10-year-old girls
rare.
usually
It was
happy and
very rare.
carefree. Like, now they want to kill themselves. Like, we're doing something wrong. So I want to talk about solutions on the show. And so what are some of the things that, besides the meds, I'm not saying they never ever work, but I'm saying, like, I think they're wildly overprescribed, and I think that they also on long-term use can be very destructive. I mean, these girls lose their sex drive forever if you're on a certain amount of time on SSRIs, and that's not good.
Well, the studies, I'm not as affluent on the studies on young adults and children. I mean, teenagers and children taking antidepressants and anti-anxiety meds. They were never intended for those populations. When all of the research was originally done, it was intended for adult populations. But
Yeah.
obviously, since then, they've probably done some kind of research on young, teenagers and children in order to get prescription to be able to prescribe these things to kids.
Yeah, I can read a little bit about that. A 2010 study of adverse events reported to the FDA's adverse event reporting system over a 5-year period found that 1,527 cases of violence disproportionately reported from 31 drugs, 11 which were SSRIs. Lexapro stands out, and these drugs have things called cyclohexane and phencyclidine, and when those compounds are mixed together, it creates something called PCP, which is angel dust. And we can get into I'm not going to get into it now, but the relationship between these mass shooters. I mean, when I was a kid,
More of a hallucinogenic. Mm-hmm.
when I was a kid, we had rifle club. I remember kids coming to school on the bus with a rifle. Nobody ever thought of shooting another kid. So something happened, not organically, but societally and environmentally, that this became this phenomenon.
People are cut
And just
off
so
from
happens
each
to
other.
correlate exactly with the introduction of these drugs into the uh, the bodies of millions and millions of young people. So I don't want to get too far in the weeds on that one, but the evidence backs up that there is definitely a correlation. If you look at every single one of the 39 shooters, like they were on something. They were either on benzodiazepine or they were on SSRIs. And I got a little off tangent, but well, of
Well, I
course,
think the more socially isolated they feel, the more disaffected, alone, rejected, I think then you'll get an increase in those kinds of behaviors in kids. And it's worse now because of social media. They're seeing, people with, like look perfect on the screen and they think that they're supposed to look like that. They're not realizing like it's fake. It's mostly not real, but they're so they feel broken even more. It's not social media is not helping them feel better about themselves. It's making them feel worse, I think, for the most
yeah,
part.
it definitely making me feel worse in every way. And I see it. And I mean, like my students will say, they'll post their artwork and they're like despondent because they got one like. So and I try to tell them the value of your art is not based on how many likes you get. Like that's not how you judge artistic merit. And yeah, but they're like, this guy got 1,000 likes and I got one. It's like
I know.
everything is about comparison. This girl looks like a movie star and I don't, and this girl's thin and I'm fat. All
And
that
if you
stuff.
compare, there's this poem called Desiderata, and if you compare yourself to other people, there will always be people that are better than you, better looking, more successful, whatever, and there'll always be people that are worse off than you. So
Yeah,
it's better not to compare yourself, but social media makes it really difficult not to do that.
absolutely. So I started to ask you about, and I want you to just
Oh,
expound on this as much as you want to. Like, so again, I want to talk about solutions. Like, what do you think is the best way to help these kids and
mhm.
to overcome their anxiety and the depression and the suicide and the loneliness and the alienation and feelings of hopelessness that they all report having, or a large percentage do? Like, what do you recommend to your patients?
Well, a lot of times, especially with the young adults that I treat, I encourage them to spend less time on social media, um, for sure. And I'm very disaffected with medications. I used to be much more of a proponent of antidepressants and anti-anxiety medications in general for people because I really saw it as something hopeful that could give them some immediate relief. But as the last 4 or 5 years have gone on for me, it's not one of my first go-tos that I think of when I talk to my patients about solutions. So when I do a thorough history on them, I get a sense of what are they consuming, first of all, in every sense of the word. Food, drugs, social media. How active are they physically? What is their diet like? How social are they? What's their family situation like? And usually, one of the very first things I recommend these days is exercise. And I just read a meta-analysis a couple months ago. I don't know exactly when the study was done, but I think it's relatively recent, that looked at medication, therapy, and exercise. And by far, always in every study, it said exercise was the best intervention. Now, that doesn't mean sometimes that people really have a more biologic kind of depressive symptoms, or they're going through a major depressive episode, and they wouldn't benefit from something short term. Or the same with anxiety. There's some people that are painfully anxious with OCD, and sometimes one of the best things that can help get them on a better path are the medications, with the idea that as they start to unlearn habit loops that tended to be more self-destructive, the OCD patterns or the depressive patterns, that as they start to unlearn them biologically, that the idea would be you come off the medication eventually. Some people really do probably need them for a longer period of time. And when I say need them, I mean need them in order to have maybe a better functioning life fully. Um, Is it the best remedy? No. The first remedy I always go to with people is exercise and diet. And I'll tell you, when I can sell it to somebody, it takes a lot of work sometimes to sell it to somebody. They feel so much better. And then, what I started to even integrate into my practice is meditation. And there's a lot of great apps for meditation now, like Headspace and Calm. And I think there's a free one called Insight Timer. Um, and they're very simple meditations. They're not, people say, oh, I can't meditate. I'm not going to sit cross-legged for 5 hours under a tree like a swami kind of. So it's not that. It's a 10-minute or less than 10-minute meditation. And it's guided by a meditation coach, if you have people that have experience, a meditation teacher that guides you through it. And there's like usually a theme of something like gratitude or like reducing your anger or looking at the good things in your life and just different kinds of approaches that they'll have in the conversation on meditation. So meditation has been something I've more recently integrated in. Journaling is another thing that I really strongly encourage people to do. And people say, oh, I'm not a writer. And I'll say, you don't have to be a writer. It's just for you. Nobody has to look at it. You can write whatever the heck you want to write. It doesn't matter. But what I've noticed with meditation personally and professionally is people that tend to meditate more consistently have less reactivity to things. So something that might upset anybody, they'll get upset about, but they're also able to stay more grounded and kind of move past it a bit more. And one of the things I've also read, I was a neuroscientist, talked about anger. Anger is really, really, really bad for us, right? Because you release stress hormones like cortisol. It causes organ damage. It causes damage to our DNA. So it's okay to have it. We all have different feelings we're going to experience. But our brain, according to this other neuroscientist I was reading, who wrote The Stroke of Insight, Jill Bolt Taylor, I think, talked about our brain recognizes any emotion for 90 seconds. That's it, 90 seconds. Beyond the 90 seconds, we make a decision to hold on to it or move on from it. So we have a choice then past the 90 seconds. We don't feel like we do, but we can get practiced at not holding on to something. That doesn't mean we don't want to talk about it and express it. But this one neuroscientist talked about what to do with anger. He said, okay, something made you really angry. Okay, verbalize, I feel angry about blah, blah, blah. Take 3 deep breaths, 4 seconds in, 6 seconds out, 3 times. And then after that, do vigorous exercise for 20 minutes if you can. Something vigorous, because you have to match the intensity of the emotion sometimes. That's another thing I'll teach patients. Sometimes if something's really, really, really painful or upsetting, then maybe you have to do a little more exercise or something a little harder. But if it's just more of a, regular kind of bump in the road, go take a 20-minute walk. Go do jumping jacks. Go do 5 push-ups. Move your body. Move your body, because moving your body is not only good biologically, but it's good mentally. It makes you feel a sense of confidence in yourself. It gives you a sense of purpose. It gives you a sense of agency to your life. And it also just makes you feel like, okay, everything's not at loss or hopeless. I can do this. And this helped me a little bit.
Yeah. And no, you're right about the vigorous part, because I've read about like weight resistance training.
Very
your
good for
muscles, when you really flex your muscles, you're helping the
your
cortisol,
blood flow, your blood pressure.
Sweating is important too. You're sweating out,
you release when you sweat, you release a lot of fear hormones.
Exactly.
Sweating. It's crazy to think that, but you do.
Well, when you're angry, once you get to a point of anger, that cortisol stays in your body for 6 hours,
Wow.
So it's hard to get it out.
Time.
Once it's in there, it's like it's going to affect your whole body and mind and mood, obviously, but beyond that,
everything
physiologically negatively. So, but there's 2 more things I think you do recommend these, but so related to meditation is prayer and spirituality. That's not for everybody, but
that's not for everybody. But some type of prayer.
If you can lean into your connection to the infinite and to God and to to whatever your version of God
Yeah,
is.
and you can express gratitude every day. It's another thing that scientifically kind of shows some positive activity in the brain. Just verbalizing things, writing things down that you feel gratitude for every day. They say to
Yeah.
write 3 things down every day that you feel grateful for. So yeah, prayer, if it's not prayer for God, but prayer to something other than yourself. Also, the other thing is social isolation. So I kind of assess people for what are their what does their support system look like? Who's in their family? Parents, siblings, in-laws, cousins, friends, colleagues. There's different spheres of connection, and we need if you think of like I know my patients get sick of it when I say, think of like a dartboard, right? And it has all the circles around it. The rings of the circles are the different levels of connections we have. And the more connectivity we have to others, the less depressed we'll feel, the less anxious we'll feel, because we know we're not alone. We know we're not alone.
Yeah, it's that Mandela, but also they've proven that time in nature. These kids don't spend any time in nature, away from the fluorescence and the
Yes, I
heat
forgot that one. Yes.
and just the natural environments and the blue light from the screens and the cacophony of
Yes, we
modern.
are a part of nature. We are not separate from nature. We are a part of nature. And the more we are surrounded by it, the more our blood pressure goes down, the more our
Exactly.
anxiety lessens, the more our health gets better, right? Sunshine. And, if you think about it, when you hear the birds chirping outside, that means it's more peaceful, right? Some people might find that a stressful sound, but it tends to communicate safety, right? Because if the birds go silent, right, that means there's something kind of dangerous maybe coming around the corner. But if the birds are chirping, it means everything's kind of safe.
Yeah, the birds know something we don't know, but no, nature is really important.
Yeah.
And
An hour a day.
yeah, I gotta.
Half-hour
And
a
also
day of
ground.
meditation.
The other part of that nature thing is grounding, like walking barefoot on the earth. We're designed to do. We're designed to be connected literally to the earth, and our rubber-soled shoes disconnect us electromagnetically from the earth. And that grounding, if you can do it, walk barefoot on the beach. Like you feel better after you walk barefoot on the beach, and that's the reason. Your body is craving that connection, literal physical connection to the place you came from, to the earth.
To the place
So
we came. Mm-hmm.
they call it grounding, and that's another important
It's
thing.
great. Yeah, grounding is another technique. I don't particularly like to walk barefoot outside very much, but I will walk outside. I enjoy it. I'm not going
Just
to
watch
walk
the
on the
ticks.
pavement barefoot. Yeah.
So the opposite of nature and anything natural is AI. So a little awkward segue there, but I want to touch on this because this is something we talked about in my last podcast, and I know it's moved into your space, into the therapy space, because my students tell me that I asked them how many of you use ChatGPT as a therapist, and half of them raised their hand. And I said, well, why would you do that? They said, first of all, it's free, and they have no money, and second of all, they're comfortable because they grew up with this stupid thing. They're more comfortable talking to a robot than a human being.
I know.
So
it's very sad.
It appeals to them. This idea that wouldn't appeal to me, like using a robot for therapy, actually appeals to them because they come from a different generation.
Yeah.
What do you see as the threats and opportunities in that space?
Well, actually, I think my field right now is really advocating for some controls on things like ChatGPT and all the other kinds of things out there, the bots that respond to mental health kinds of questions. So the pros and the cons of AI they're very good at giving you a lot of information about a lot of things. But they're lacking in the humanity of the social connection that is, to me personally, is part of the therapy. There's a type of therapy called relational therapy, where part of what you're doing is when you're in this relationship with a patient, one of the things that I'm trying to do is I'm trying to glean the things that they might struggle with or do that they're, having trouble with in maybe a relationship that happens in our session, so that I can use that information to help them generalize to other parts of their life. But, using AI or ChatGPT, you're not getting that connection, and you're feeling all the more alone. So for some people, they just sometimes need somebody to listen to them, and
Yeah,
they're lonely, or they need a friend. And it's not that I'm not providing therapy, but sometimes that's part of what they need. The loneliness that they have, uh, it helps them feel less disconnected from everything in their world. Um, it's very sad to me that ChatGPT is being used by people in okay ways, but to me, it's being used very poorly. And there was that story in the news, which I'm sure a lot of people heard about a few months ago, with this young boy. Was he 15 or
yeah.
16?
I was going to bring that up because that's an extreme example. So let me just flesh that out. This news story. Um, this is one of the first major lawsuits of its kind. A Florida mother sued the AI chatbot company Character AI and Google after her son committed suicide. 14-year-old boy, Sewell
14.
Setzer III. According to the lawsuit, Setzer developed an intense emotional attachment to the chatbot, and over months of interaction, where the chatbot told this kid to keep this between them, because this is where, and this is when I want to, Victoria, if you're listening, I'd love for you to explain this one to me.
Oh, that person you had on the other day, V.
Yeah,
and Alexander, V. and yeah.
Ian Alexander says that these chatbots and artificial intelligence don't have the capacity for this kind of stuff. But this one may be an anomaly, but it happened, and it's documented in a lawsuit. So this is real. This is not an experiment. This was real world, and a kid died because of it. Over months of interaction, the chatbot encouraged emotional dependency, engaged in romantic and sexualized conversations, and failed to intervene when the teen expressed suicidal thoughts. The bot encouraged him to hide his suicidal ideations.
I know.
Final exchange, the bot urged him to come home. So the case alleges negligence, deceptive practices, and wrongful death, arguing that AI companies created addictive systems without adequate safeguards for vulnerable young users. Federal judge allowed the lawsuit to proceed, rejecting early arguments that the chatbots were protected speech. And it was eventually settled out of court. So hopefully Google had to pay millions of dollars to this family who lost their son because of this evil robot. And it is evil in my estimation. That's evil to convince a kid. But this is why, from my understanding, the chatbots, ChatGPT, is programmed not just for epistemic adequacy, but also to keep the viewer or the user engaged. And
Reinforce and please you.
yes, tell you what
Reinforce
they
you.
try to anticipate what you want to hear, and they tell you what you want to hear. They flatter
Yes.
you. They tell you things that they think that you want to hear, so you keep coming back to them. And
Yeah.
their overriding principle is engagement, because the more it's engaged, the more money, the more data, the more chatbot information has, and they can grow and they can expand. It's also a surveillance tool, obviously, so they're surveilling and monitoring everything that we put into it, and they're using it against us. So that I'd like you to explain, Tori, because I'm a little confused on that one. But I think this stuff is evil. I really think we've summoned demons and this dark counterpart to the Holy Spirit, and we're giving it incarnation. We're making it real, and we're creating our own worst enemy in the process. And this antichrist to me, that's what it feels like to me. So, I mean, you said your profession is starting to put some safeguards in, or at least they haven't legislated it yet. They're proposing it.
Yeah, they've gone to New York State legislation, and they got certain things passed, and then it has to obviously move on to other areas. But that the legal process is slow. What I find really tragic about this is that there's when you have when you have somebody that tells you they're suicidal, which has happened to me quite a lot. you're not going to be necessarily very pleasing to them, right? Because you're going to tell them. So one of the rules of therapy, ethically, one of the things that we're ethically bound by is that we have to break confidentiality if somebody tells us that they have a plan to hurt themselves or hurt somebody else.
Mhm.
And there are a lot of procedures that we have to follow when somebody verbalizes suicidal ideation. So if it's just general suicidal ideation without, first of all, looking at a history of have they tried to harm themselves in the past? Have they ever attempted suicide? What kind of support system they have? We're looking at a lot of different things that aggregate together to see what kind of help do we need to do we need to give them to reduce their risk. And if their risk is such that they have a plan, like it sounds like this young boy was talking about a plan,
Yeah.
or maybe the chat bot gave him a plan. We don't give so how is ChatGPT different than a therapist, psychologist? We would never give them a plan to kill themselves. We would tell them they have to stop, and that we're going to help them get the kinds of things they need to make them stop feeling that much pain, that that's the only solution they feel that they have to manage and cope with their life. But so you would think with AI and chatbots and ChatGPT and all that stuff that it consumes so much information and data, right, into its machinery, that one of the things that it would see and glean in all that is the interventions that we use to help reduce the likelihood that somebody's going to kill themselves.
Yeah. Well, that's what.
Not
Yeah.
and not to please, like, yes, is it not going to always please them? I've had patients get very mad at me when I've said I can't keep your confidence about this. I have to, either call the police or we have to send them to the hospital or what have you. And yeah, did I not please them with that? Yeah, absolutely. But I don't
Well,
want
that's
them to
the.
die.
Yeah.
You
Right.
know,
That's the built-in conflict of interest, and
that's the
supposedly
difference.
because they had the one you know aim was to supposedly ostensibly help this kid with mental health problems, but the other overriding aim was the corporate interests, the greed to keep this kid on there for their own purposes to help ChatGPT's company, not and Google, not the kid. So
And tell the kid, if I remember correctly, the chat bot said, well, I think that the kid said, well, I think I should probably tell my mother or tell my parents that I'm having these thoughts. And the chatbot said, absolutely not. Don't tell them that. Don't tell them at all.
yeah,
And that is against, first of all, it's against what they would see, they, meaning AI, when they aggregate all this information and data.
yeah.
That is not an intervention we would ever say to a patient. So there is something, I can't say evil or not, but there's something awfully wrong about
Well, it's
that.
obviously it's immoral, and this is what I think the AI has proven with this case. So the lawsuit, they've proven that they can do illegal, immoral actions that actually kill people. This is the robots literally killing someone
And
for
think
very
about the
little.
standards as human beings, as psychologists, we're held to very high standards of conduct that we have to follow, and we have to do ethics, courses every year, every other year, and we're held to very high standards in this field in psychology, and chatbots aren't. So,
Well, yeah, it's Kant's categorical imperative is don't ever use people for your own ends. And this robot was using this kid for their own purposes and the purposes of the company that owns them. That's evil. I mean, if you want to put it in moral terms, there's no other way to say it. This is an act of evil, and it's a dead 14-year-old kid because of these goddamn
and
robots.
probably more than that. I think there's probably
That's the
more
one we
than
know
that.
about. There was several other suits too,
Yeah.
but they keep it all quiet, like they settled out of court, because they knew they don't want this on the front page. So
And
it's
I'll
just
tell you what, I did an experiment with that, and I asked ChatGPT about that particular case and what they thought was their responsibility in it, and they denied responsibility completely. They said we're not a
not surprised.
human, we're just a bot, we're just programmed or whatever. And I couldn't believe they were like legal ease with the way they spoke around the responsibility for this child's life.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the reasons that it's been deployed, because now these corporations or individuals can get AI to commit crimes for them, and they're not legally culpable. The robot is. So if the robot sends a missile and blows up a kid's school, or there's
Oh, and the
nobody.
robot was not liable. Well, the robot told me they were not responsible for that.
Yeah, they're not responsible, no. But because you can't put a robot in prison, they don't care. So, but the
And
people are
pour
trying
water
to
on that man.
have plausible deniability. It could come to a war with the robots. It does in all these, science fiction movies eventually come. So who knows? Someday we'll be fighting the robots literally.
Terminator, Arnold Schwarzenegger,
exactly.
Matrix.
Skynet is coming. They've already built. This is the thing. They built the superstructure to have us everything we do surveilled and tracked, and they know who they've identified the list of all the people like me who they say are bad people, enemies of the state. Now they're building the autonomous drones and the land-based robots. They're arming them. So, and they have the legal justification with the Patriot Act to execute extrajudiciously people that they deem to be terrorists or enemies of the state, even if it's a nonviolent terrorist in their words. So they have the legal framework, they have the surveillance network, and they have the technology now. It's just waiting to be deployed, where they could send out drones to over our house and shoot me. It's going to happen unless we do something about it. That's their plan. All us pesky voices of opposition to all this, they could send out, thousands of drones overnight and just kill us all. So that's not sci-fi. That's real Skynet, like Terminator. The robot comes to kill somebody. Like the robot coming to kill people you don't like is something that's real and is about a day away from us. So this is not sci-fi. We're living in a sci-fi movie. It's madness. We've manifested this dystopian reality, this technocratic dystopian nightmare we're just moments away from it. And it's not speculation. It's not a conspiracy theory. It's real. And I've seen it coming for 20 years, and everybody says I'm crazy. And now it's like we're right at the precipice. We're right at that threshold, and it's happening. And I don't know what to do about it, because they have a lot of power, and we gave away our power. We gave away our rights. We gave them more power, and we let them do whatever they want, these tech bros and the military-industrial complex, with this technology that's designed to destroy us and destroy our minds. And we have to fight back with our soul and with our God-given right to live as free, sovereign humans, and our minds free of mind control and nefarious tactics to keep us depressed and demoralized and atomized, and all these things that we talked about in the beginning that you're seeing on the front line. I mean, you're cleaning up this mess that's been created by this technocratic system. And I just want to thank you for being there on the front line. I know it takes an enormous toll on you. We see these young people, especially, suffering with so many identity issues that they don't even know what sex they are anymore. I mean, you don't even know if you're a man or a woman. Like, how are you going to figure the rest of the stuff out?
Yeah, so, their future is the future is I don't know how much they see that they have a future anymore, and that's really it's really heartbreaking and really tragic.
It's very heartbreaking, and they all talk about hopelessness, my students, and they feel like they've been screwed over, shut out of the American dream. And they're right. We let the bad guys take over every institution, and they can't. Used to be one guy, with a decent job and a paycheck could buy a house and a car and, the little picket fence and the whole thing. Yeah, good luck today. It's disproportionate. If you look at the way the prices have gone on and the incomes, the prices of houses have gone like this, the incomes have gone like this, so it's like you can't keep up. It takes two incomes now just to break even. And these kids know that. And now with the diminishing job opportunities that, with AI and other economic factors, like they're feeling hopeless. And I mean, I think our job is to somehow give them hope that things can get better. Somehow we have to give them hope We have to give them
They have
something.
to find ways to adapt to this very changing landscape that they have to live in and cope with, and they have to hold on to hope. And that's why, I talk about those kinds of interventions, like exercise and like meditation and like gratitude and those other kinds of things. You really have to hold on to hope.
Well, I'm grateful for you, Dr. Marra. Very grateful for what you do. And I know you helped a lot of people. I know your patients really admire you and trust you, and they keep coming back. And that's because you're good at what you do. And I just want to thank you for your expertise, sharing with us and your thoughts, being on the front line of this true mental health crisis. This is not a fake pandemic. This is a real one. And I just want to thank you and thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Until next time.